The Woman King has been subject to extensive criticism for its blatant falsification of history, so much so that star Viola Davis actually addressed the complaints to Variety. I found the response to be most unsatisfactory. In this editorial, I will begin with reiterating what the problem with The Woman King really is, before seeing what Viola Davis had to say to its defense and why what was said is tone-deaf and historyless beyond words. No matter what impression you may get from posters, trailers, or even the movie itself, The Woman King is not any kind of authentic African story. Instead, it is the brainchild of social justice activist, producer, and former actress Maria Bello and social justice activist and writer Dana Stevens. They chose to tell a female empowerment fantasy in which the all-good Dahomey women were forced to do evil things by the Dahomey men, who, like every other man on Earth, is evil. Davis' character and her storyline and character arc is 100% fiction, and set against the backdrop of a highly sanitized version of the Dahomey tribe and an oversimplified look at the Atlantic slave trade. All of that could have been fine, of course, if it were treated like satire, or if it was the backdrop of a fantasy tale like The Black Panther, or some kind of Quentin Tarantino-esque alternate history. Had it been any of that, there would be no issue, but it's not. Instead, The Woman King is presented as an authentic story, and it claims to be based on real events, even though that is patently bullshit. That is not to say it is not a well-crafted and entertaining feature film. By all accounts, it is. The problem with it is that the people who made it blatantly falsified history and tacitly proclaimed their alternate version of it to be true. For a slightly more detailed look at how much the movie deviates from actual history, certainly where the Dahomey are concerned, I refer you to our previous video on the matter. The incendiary rewriting of history naturally caused a backlash, but Sony were no doubt mortified to find out that this backlash didn't come from white people, which they may have been expecting and even hoping for in accordance with the fan-baiting school of marketing, which we covered in another earlier video. But no, the backlash came from the black community, and rightfully so, which rendered any kind of studio response kind of moot. This backlash even reached such a level that the studio fed Viola Davis a canned official response to be given to any trade who raised the matter, which studio mouthpiece Variety most helpfully did. First of all, on behalf of the studio and marketing department, Davis emphasized to Variety that the story of The Woman King can connect to all audiences. Not only black women, as if that somehow was ever in doubt, saying, "There was a sense that our stories aren't universal and can't reach the white man or woman or the Hispanic man or woman. I feel human stories are for everyone, not just black consumption." Just today, Davis told Variety, a white woman asked her, "Does it surprise you that your story could reach me as a white woman?" To which, if this conversation actually happened, which it didn't, Viola should have answered, "Does it surprise you, white woman, that this is in fact not my story, but a story that two other white women of activist leanings simply made up out of empty nothingness, and then populated it with black people to ensure the studio would greenlight it?" Anyway, after more studio marketing-driven spin, Viola was asked. #BoycottWomanKing popped up over the weekend with people who felt it doesn't address the Dahomey Kingdom's involvement in slavery. We don't see that type of complaint when a Christopher Columbus movie is released that doesn't cover cultural genocide. What do you have to say to those that feel it leaves out those parts of history? This, of course, is a scripted and planned question, setting up a victimhood narrative, which I would hope most people are able to spot right away. Ask yourself, when was the last time a Columbus movie was released which didn't address the cultural genocide without there being complaints? That's a pretty long time ago. Then ask yourself, if such a movie were to be released tomorrow, do you think there wouldn't be complaints? Because I'm pretty sure it would. So, now that we're aware that the question was very strategically worded, Davis replied, "We entered the story where the kingdom was in flux, at a crossroads. They were looking to find some way to keep their civilization and kingdom alive. It wasn't until the late 1800s that they were decimated. Most of the story is fictionalized. It has to be. Given where the filmmakers chose to set their story, yeah, it obviously had to be. Because if it wasn't, the audience might have been rooting for that eventual decimation. Then her husband, who is also in the movie, chimed in. We are now what we call edutainment. It's history, but we have to take license. We have to entertain people. If we just told a history lesson, which we very well could have, that would have been a documentary. Unfortunately, people wouldn't be in theaters doing the same thing we saw this weekend. We didn't want to shy away from the truth. But you did. That's kind of the problem here. But he goes on. The history is massive, and there are truths on that are there. If people want to learn more, they can investigate more. Let's hope they do, because they will have to in order to unlearn the overt falsifications that were put into this movie, because taking the borderline propaganda presented here at face value would be detrimental to the worldview of anyone who believes this. Any movie based on historic events will obviously have to take some creative license in crafting the story and narrative. A movie has to adhere to certain dramaturgical requirements in order to capture and hold the audience's attention, so just there, liberties will have to be taken. This is par for the course. If it's an area of history that we only know so much about, even more liberties have to be taken. Case in point, HBO's Rome, one of the greatest series ever made. If you haven't seen it, you should. In it, we see a fictionalized retelling of events that reverberated through history from the perspective of Roman legionnaires Titus Pullo and Lucius Vorenus. Two historic figures we know existed because Gaius Julius Caesar himself commended them for being awesome, but beyond that, we know nothing about them. The rest of their lives and their interactions with the Roman aristocracy and unfolding historic events is entirely made up. But the backdrop is not, and so the fictional interpersonal drama is consistent with actual historic events. That is the most one can hope for, and in my book, the standard everyone who proclaims to make a movie based on real events should strive for. The Tudors did that. Vikings did that. The Northmen did that. Plenty more movies did not, and all of them were called out for it. If The Woman King appears to be called out more, it's because the liberties it takes are more extreme than what any other compatible movie proclaiming to be based on real events has done for decades. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.